Now, you want to start a Pokemon card business, but don't exactly know how or what steps to take. Today, we're going to go over a quick guide that I came up with to get things started and get things rolling, so that way when you start selling Pokemon cards in your state, you are ready to go. Now, let's get into it. Now, to start, I want to thank PokeNE. I have been watching his videos for well over a year now. It's actually getting pretty close to when I actually first bought my domain, which is coming up at the end of this month. I have waited quite a long time to get everything going, but I did at least get all the other stuff ready to go that we're going to go over in this guide to get myself ready for when I actually want to launch my website. But I have been using this LLC for my vending business as well, so it's kind of going to tie together. But let's kind of go over what steps to take and what order and why they're important. All right, and just kind of go over briefly why it's important to have LLC. Is just protect yourself legally and things go wrong. It's very rare that you might have any issues with that you will need the LLC protection, but it's good to have it just in case regardless. Also, it just looks professional. It makes you look official, and also it makes you take yourself and your brand seriously. If you're just doing this without an LLC, you may just kind of fall off, not take it seriously, and just not feel like you're overall obligated to it and we're committed, which I can be sometimes myself, but once I kind of got this rolling, I took it seriously. I feel really ready to go, and I really want to pursue this, which is why I set it up. And so here's how we're going to go and what I did over the last year and what you should do too if you're planning on getting this going as well. So number one, choose a business name that is unique to your state. Now, the easiest way to do this is to just Google online and figure out how to look up the databases of business names within your state. For me, it's SOS Directs for in Texas, and I believe you can do a search for very little cost. It's about $1 to $2, but again, it changes depending on the state, and you can look up to see if the name is available. If your name is available and you're not quite ready to go through all the steps of forming the LLC, I do recommend reserving the name, just so that way at least you have the name reserved, and just in case someone decides to have an idea and that's very similar to yours. Very unlikely, but it's still something you should look out for. I think, and then we'll go into that and the cost of that a little bit later. And then just build a brand that you think you're comfortable with. Whatever that name is going to be your business name until you decide that you no longer want that business. So make sure it's a name that you're comfortable with. You can build a brand around and build that identity along with it. All right, so a registered agent is something that you don't really need, but I think it's highly recommended, especially if you don't have a business address that is not your home. For example, you don't have a retail front store. It's purely an online business that you run out of your house, which is what I plan on doing here pretty soon. And this is where I think a registered agent is actually very important. Pretty much all it does is receive legal mail. It ends up being the address that all your legal mail goes through and where your business address technically will be, even though it's not a physical address that you use. So the reason why I did it mainly is because it keeps my home address private. If you run a store out of your own home and not a retail space, you may want to consider this, because if your inventory is at your home and you're running it out of your private residence, you do not want that information out there. This is something that I highly recommend to do. Low cost, $40 to $50 a year, depending on your state. For mine, I think it's roughly about $50 a year. And if you decide to get multiple years all at once, they'll typically go as low as about $20 to $30 a year. So definitely something I think is worth it, I guess, just to keep things private and to hide some of your personal information. Next, you're going to form the LLC. So like I said, within Texas, I'm going to use SOS Direct, and that's going to be the place that I would do name reservations, LLC formation, and submit all the proper forms that you need to do. So which would be the file articles of formation. So this is going to be the largest cost to you up front. It's around $300 for the state of Texas. Varies by state, so just kind of double check what that cost is to you. Really simple process. It doesn't take very long. It runs through all the information for you, and just make sure you have all your information ready to go, such as mailing address, such as a PO box or a UPS box, a registered agent's address, or if you don't want to go with a registered agent, your home address, and then it'll walk you through all the steps. It takes a little bit. You might have to go back and forth just to kind of find the information that you need, but it doesn't take very, very long. I think for me, it took about an hour or two just to make sure I was typing in everything correctly and filling it out the way that it should. So use your state's official web address. Mine is SOS Direct. You're going to want to file a single member LLC. It's the most common. Don't overcomplicate it. That's just what you're going to choose. And again, it'll walk you through some of the steps on what you need to do. And the reason that you're going to do this is because you want to separate the business from you. So personal assets are in one are for you, and then your business assets are going to be in your business. And then so what I was going to talk about is name reservation. So what I did about a year ago and why it took me so long to kind of get everything going is I started this process after seeing some of Pokey and E's videos, and I decided, well, let's go at least reserve the name, because I already started putting out videos on there. So my name was already out there, but I just wanted to make sure I secured it and didn't have any issues when I decided to file. So in Texas, it's about $40 to reserve the name, and that reservation is good for 120 days. So if you don't feel like dropping $300, you don't feel quite ready, I would suggest doing the name reservation, so that way at least you have it there when you're ready to go. All right, so next you're going to create an operating agreement. With this, it just explains how your LLC is run, helpful even if you're by yourself. Pretty much describes the business structure and shows separation between you and your business. With this, you can hire a professional if you want to, or you can just have chat help you out. For me, I just had ChatGPT help me out as far as drafting a basic operating agreement, and it's just going to go through some steps. I think it's about anywhere between 10 to 15 items, just stating exactly the structure of your business, how it's laid out, how it's run, and it just kind of further shows that you're separating yourself between your personal assets and your business assets. Doing it yourself costs no money, just your time. So I do suggest doing that yourself, again, because it's pretty straightforward. You pretty much are going to need it to submit to a bank, so that way you can open up a business checking account. So it is important just to have one. You're not going to need it for every single thing that you do, but it's at least have it. Professionals, it can cost anywhere, again, up to $200, but why do that? Most of these professionals too, if they get stuff like this, they'll have AI help them out too, and then kind of clean it up for your own personal use. So I haven't had any issues for when I used chat myself. So I think it's a pretty straightforward item that you can get done pretty quickly. Next, you're going to want to get yourself an employee identification number. What is that? An IRS issue business ID, and it's free to get. Once you already have your LLC ready to go, which it takes about maybe 3 to 7 days, I think, something like that, to get approval for your LLC once everything is submitted, so long as nothing's incorrect or wrong. So then you can get yourself the EIN number. Pretty much a social security number for your business. That's all it really is. So it's required for any kind of banking and as well as tax purposes. So definitely going to need it. Can't skip this step. It's just one of those things you're going to have to do. Next, you're going to want to get yourself a sales and use tax permit. So the sales and use tax permit pretty much lets you collect taxes legally within your state. Free to apply. I think this is the thing that takes the longest to get back. I think for me, it was about 2 to 3 weeks. So definitely once you have your LLC done, as well as your EIN number, you should go ahead and go straight to the sales and use tax permit, and you'll just go ahead and get that started. So that way you just kind of keep the ball rolling, and you're not having to slow down and stop your progress into getting things officially started. Pretty much required to sell in all states, especially if you're running an online business. You're going to have to collect sales tax, and you're going to have to pay the state for those sales tax. So you're going to need it. No way around it. Eventually, if you get Nexus in other states, then you will need to also apply for sales tax permits within those states. But that's going to be pretty much ways away down the line. There are differences in each state. If you ever watch Pokey and E's videos, he explained this. He explains this perfectly, because he had a pretty awful experience with Nexus. So pretty much the gist of it is, if you sell a certain amount or as so many transactions in a different state, then you will have to start collecting sales tax. That's why sometimes if you look at some of these smaller websites and you start buying from them, they actually don't collect sales tax, because within that year they haven't reached that threshold to begin to have to collect sales tax, which actually can be beneficial for customers of your website pretty early, just because they can save, a certain percentage. I think in my state it's about 8.25%. So it is helpful as far as saving some of your customers money early on. But again, it's just you had to build that trust first for them to want to do that anyway. So This is where the NAICS code is chosen. It may appear a little bit earlier too. I'm not exactly sure, but I know for sure when I applied for the sales tax permit, it asked for this. Pretty much all this is it tells the government what you do or sell. So for Pokemon card businesses, typically you're going to be doing the code that is associated with hobbies, toys, and goods. I don't think it says collectibles, but typically hobbies and toys is where you're going to end up choosing. It gets a little confusing because in some websites they name it a little bit differently. So you just got to make sure when you're going through these documents and submitting all these applications, you maintain the same code throughout. And it shouldn't change. It's just a little bit confusing on how to get to the actual proper code, because I know in one of them, for me, it kept showing a different code than what I originally put in. But it just took some time to find it and get to the correct code. But again, your miles may vary on this one. Once you have all that stuff figured out, once you have everything approved, you can go ahead and open a business checking account. Now, you can technically do this before you get your sales and use tax permits. While you're waiting on that, go ahead and get your business checking account, fund it. Pretty much the biggest thing is just find a bank that works best for you. Costs $0. Sometimes they require like a minimum deposit. Maybe it's like $25 or so. So pretty much just find a bank that works best. Also, if you have a decent amount of starting capital, I would suggest maybe finding a bank that does have checking bonuses. So that have checking bonuses, so that we can just kind of get a few extra dollars for whatever purposes you need, whether it be expenses or more inventory, what have you. But usually what happens with those is that you end up having to have like a minimum balance or a number of transactions to avoid account fees. Now, the account fees typically are around $15 or so, but you don't want one that has stupid requirements like having over $2,000 in the account at all times. So try to find one that at least has like maybe a number of transactions to at least be able to have it waived, so that way you're not just losing money every single month because you don't hit a certain requirement. And so, yeah, again, so initial funds just depends on the bank. Just kind of look up whatever's around you. And it just helps with this just to separate your finances. So it is kind of expected that when you first start off a business, you will be using some personal funds, whether it be like expenses for domains, equipment, table fees, anything of that sort, as well as like inventory. You want to start separating your finances pretty quickly so that way things become a lot cleaner. And come tax time, you have a separate account for each one, so that way you're not having to jump back and forth and getting confused yourself, as well as putting yourself at risk for auditing if it gets really bad. So like I said, you can start early on with personal funding, but as soon as you can, separate the finances so that you have it more organized and it becomes easier for when you're bookkeeping. I definitely recommend getting yourself started on a spreadsheet, which I'll make a video on that a little bit later. So now you're going to want to know your filing schedules. Now, you should already be mostly set up by now and ready to go, but you do have to be aware that there are going to be deadlines on tasks that you need to complete for your business. So you can choose monthly, quarterly, or yearly on franchise taxes. So with Texas, it's called a franchise tax, and it's done either, and you select on which one you prefer. For me, I believe I did yearly. And so every year in May, I'm going to have to make sure I submit a form to say, okay, this is the amount of revenue that I sold. And they'll let you know if you hit a certain threshold that you were going to have to pay taxes on some of that stuff. So I haven't done it yet, so I'm not quite sure how this works. But the moment it does, I'll be able to kind of relay that information a little bit better. Even if you owe $0, you have to file. That's what they require. They want you to keep up with it. And if you do not, there are some penalties, and it varies by state. In the state of Texas, if you don't file this, you do get penalized $50. I'm not sure if that repeats, but I do know that as soon as you don't, they're going to fine you. And then the next one's going to be annual state reports. So it's required by most states. In the state of Texas, it goes alongside with the franchise tax filings. So it really just depends if your state does them together, but it keeps your LLC active. And in Texas, it's filed with the franchise tax report. So hopefully it's like this for you. It makes it definitely a lot easier to have it all in one place and not have to keep up with two separate deadlines. And lastly, just some final thoughts. So just make sure you look up your requirements by your state. For the state of Texas, this is pretty much how I went through it and how I got everything started. But definitely check your state, because I'm not a professional and I don't know all the laws and requirements for every state. So if you do get confused or you feel like you're not confident enough to get this set up yourself, get help from a professional. I don't know exactly how much it costs, but Pokey did have a video on it, and I do believe he did say that he did get professional help just to make sure he didn't run into anything or any issues. So definitely do that if you feel uncomfortable or just not confident in doing it yourself. And again, I'm not a professional, so none of this is financial advice. This is just what I did and how to get set up, and just to kind of give you a quick guide and walk through on things that I did to get going, and so that way it kind of help you out too. So that pretty much wraps it up. I just wanted to kind of put it out there. I know there's a lot of new vendors out there and new people that want to start online Pokemon card businesses. So this is just a quick way to kind of talk about the legal aspect of getting a Pokemon card business started and what you need to do. But thanks for tuning in. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have any feedback or anything that you think I missed, please drop a comment down below and let me know, so that way I can make some adjustments in the future. Other than that, I will be putting out some more business content out there from things that I've seen and what I'm working on personally and my goals for this year. So stay tuned for more. I'll see you guys next time.